Hi, everyone. If you're like me, you have found mobile phones in the classroom to be both a blessing and a curse. There are times when I want my students to have access to the outside world, but there are other times when I just want my students fully engaged in the classroom without distracting technology. This is where our sponsor Flipped comes in. Flipped is a first ever classroom engagement application that keeps students from getting distracted by their mobile phones when they're learning, and it does it in a really clever way. Some instructors have even reported that Flipped has been associated with increased grades and reduction in attrition. If you are interested in learning more about Flipped, please visit flippedapp.co/psych. That's FLIPPDAPP.co/psych. Welcome to Psych Sessions, conversations about teaching and stuff. I'm Garth Neufeld, along with Eric Landrum, your podcast hosts. This is a special edition of the Psych Sessions podcast, IntroPsychSessions, conversations about teaching introductory psychology, where we showcase some of the best teachers from across the nation, from high school, 2-year, and 4-year institutions. We hope that you'll find this helpful as you go to prepare your own intro psych class for the upcoming year, as we talk about assessment, course design, and pretty much everything else. So let's get right into it. Please enjoy Intro Psych Sessions. All right, we are talking about intro psych, general psychology, Psych 100 or Psych 1, whatever you want to call it. And I am with Sue Frantz from Highline College, and thanks for doing this for me, Sue. I know that you have had so many conversations with people about your class over many years. Is it one of the most frequent conversations you have is Psych 100 with other teachers?
It's either going to be Psych 100 or it is going to be technology.
Right. Yep.
I don't get to talk about anything else.
That's true. Yeah, and we won't accept anything more than that
I appreciate
for today's
that.
podcast. Where do you teach?
At Highline College.
At Highline College.
Yep.
Did I say that already?
You did say that, yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, but
All
good
right.
for you for knowing.
Thank you. What should we know about Highline College? Because we're trying to get a sense of like what unique things are going on in your intro psych class. So what do we know? What do we know about Highline?
Highline College is located in South King County, just south of Seattle. We've got a very large immigrant and refugee population. We are somewhere around 75% ethnic minority, about 15,000 students annually. About half of those are in ABE, Adult Basic Education, or English as Second Language classes.
So that shapes your intro psych course.
It does. It does. I'm thinking about just last quarter. I've got students from all over the world. Students from Afghanistan, Ukraine, Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya. In the past, I've had students from Uganda, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, students from all over the Pacific Rim, Vietnam, Japan. Yep.
How big are your intro psych classes?
We cap them at 38.
38. That's face-to-face, hybrid, online, all 38.
All 38, yep.
Okay. So here's our first kind of substantive question.
Substantive?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
You got it.
Thanks. Which is, before your course starts, whether it's a week or a month, when you're thinking even now about fall quarter, because you teach in quarters, what are you doing in preparation? And you can take that wherever you want to go with it. How are you thinking about your class ahead of time before day one?
I'm pretty much always thinking about that course, which makes me sound less interesting than I think I am. So I have, I got a news feed. I bring in articles into my news feed from all over the place, National Geographic, New York Times, Washington Post, and I'm looking for any kind of content that has anything to do with psychology. And as you might imagine, that's actually pretty easy to do. And anytime I see something that comes through that I think would be a good addition to the course, I save it in a special place, and then when I sit down to revise the course, I just go to that. I go to my special place, and I look at this content, and I drop it into the course.
So How are you organizing that? Because for me, when I see so many stories come by, I think, oh, that'd be nice. I don't have an organizing mechanism to do that. What do you do?
I use Trello, Trello. It is a free project management system, essentially. And I've created a board, and you can think of it just as a bulletin board on the wall. And you can create lists. Divide up the bulletin board into columns. And then within each column, you have a card. Think index cards that you can tack up there. And you can put whatever content you want on that card. And if you click on the card flips over and you can have all kinds of content there. You can attach it to a Dropbox file, for instance, a Dropbox folder. So all the files related to that particular content are there. You can write stuff on it as messages to yourself. It's all tagged with time and date, so you know when you did it. So what I do is I use a news reader. The one that I use is called E0 I-N-O Reader. And all my news feeds are coming into that. And then inside of E0 Reader, I can click a share button, and one of my options is share to Trello. And when Trello pops up, then it asks which of my boards do I want to put it on. I choose the board, and then it asks me which column within that board I want it, and it just creates a brand new card.
Have you written a blog on this particular process?
I've written a blog on Trello. I haven't written a blog on E0 Reader, but it's on my list.
Can you actually write this whole process out?
I can.
That would be awesome. So no pressure, but
and you want me to do that before this podcast airs?
You have probably a couple months. So
yeah.
At least, yeah.
Okay.
So it would be really helpful for me to read that and just have somebody walk me through those steps of how I would do something like that. And I know that you're really generous with. I'm not saying this to like set you up, but you are really generous with the ideas that you come up with. You were just recently telling me that you just shared your whole course with somebody, and that's how our relationship has been too. So I appreciate that about you. Okay, how do you structure your course generally?
So the course is built on sort of a modified inner teaching model, is how I describe it. Students read the chapter in advance. They answer 10 to 15 questions, and those questions are applied questions. And often I'm sending students out to read these articles that I have read and then tie that into the content from the chapter. They answer these questions to the best of their ability. Then they come to class and they get into groups and they talk about what they understand and what they don't understand. And then each group gets a marker and they get space on the whiteboard in the classroom, and they can go up and each group writes on the board what it is that they want me to lecture on. And then in the second part of class, that's what I lecture on.
Okay, that's brilliant. I love this piece on the end of the students coming up to the board and writing out, and there's your lecture for the next hour. Now, could you have done this when you were an early career teacher?
It would have been challenging. But anytime somebody hears this and they're like, whoa, wait, I don't know what I'm going to be lecturing on. Well, it's not quite that, because these 10 to 15 questions are my 10 to 15 questions. So this is all content that I'm willing to lecture on or feel like I've got something ready to go. And I can do class demos in that context. I can spin off and talk about other stuff. But what this really does is it puts the responsibility for learning into the students' hands, that they have to figure out what they understand and what they don't understand, and then they're the ones who are telling me, this is what I don't understand.
Well, and the modeling that happens, I think, by being in groups together and then watching other students formulate questions for lecture, I mean, it's got to sharpen them throughout the quarter. They've got to be asking different questions by the end than they were at the beginning.
I hope so.
Yeah. And so it's on a cycle then. This happens over and over again in your class.
That's right. So then we lecture. So we talk about as a class whatever the content is for that chapter for the week. Students have until the following Monday to revise those responses, and they're preparing for the next set of questions for the next chapter.
In that time that you are lecturing or doing demos, is there... What would that hour, or I don't know how long it is, but how would that time in your class look if I was just coming into the class? Is it more lecture? Are you talking a lot? Is it discussion-based? Because they've just come out of big discussions, it sounds like, in their small groups, right?
Right. So they discuss. So on a typical Monday, groups would discuss for about 45 minutes. And then we take a 10-minute break as I pull my thoughts together and think about what order I want to cover these questions in. And for each question, students are telling me what about the question they have a question about. So they just can't say, cover question 3. They got to tell me what about question 3 are they having a hard time with to really help me understand where it is that they're struggling. So we take a 10-minute break. Students come back. And the lecture is really an interactive lecture. And before I even did this, my lecturing style was always an interactive lecture. So I talk about some stuff. Students are encouraged to ask their own questions, to provide examples of their own. That it feels much more like a conversation than it does, here, let me stand up here and lecture at you.
Plus, your students at this point in time have already read and answered questions, discussed them. So the conversation at this point is probably a little richer than if students were coming in cold or not having read at all or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Students, certainly there are going to be some students who didn't answer all the questions, who didn't do all of the reading, but they do a pretty good job of owning that they acknowledge that whatever happened that week, they didn't have time to get to it, and they totally take responsibility for that. But yeah, the conversations now in class and my interactive lectures now are definitely much richer than what they were before.
Yep.
Even when students were assigned chapters doesn't mean that they actually read them.
Right. So I'm going to limit you to a minute or two on this one because I know you're passionate about it. And in fact, you might be tired of talking about it. It's the content skills scenario. What do you do? How do you think about those things in your class? Let's just leave it there.
Content skills. So skills, I'd love to have students have more practice at reading, have more practice at writing. Those are 2 skills that are going to serve them very well in whatever job they go into. And I am upfront with students about that early in the course. You're going to get lots of practice at reading. You're going to get lots of practice at writing. And this is why. We're not going to have multiple choice tests because, as Eric Landrum says, that is the one skill that students leave college with that no employer wants. So I tell them we're not going to get any practice at taking multiple choice tests. Content is the big question in intro psych. And for me, the organizing principle is, what is it that my students need to know for their lives and for their jobs? That's it. And as enamored as we are in psychology with our history, I don't think that we need to do things like talk about Pavlov's dogs to talk about classical conditioning. Yeah,
I'm fist pumping in the room. Nobody can see it except you, but that's great. So you take all the content, all the 16 chapters of an intro psych class, and you sift it through. Is this meaningful to students' lives? And that's how you make your decisions.
Exactly.
About content. Okay, so you do not do. It doesn't sound like you do multiple choice tests in your classroom. Can you talk about assessment?
So my assessment now, and it took me a while. It took me a while to get to the point to let the multiple choice tests go. Because as a student, that's what I took. As a graduate student, I taught intro psych using multiple choice tests, and I never really gave it too much of a thought. For a good chunk of my career, my exams were multiple choice and essay in class. That's what I did. And at some point in the last 5 years, it hit me that why am I doing this? I remember I had a multiple choice final. It was comprehensive, and one of the questions asked about the action potential. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks one day. Is this really what it is I want students to know from this course? Is this piece about the action potential? If not, why is it on the final? And then the greater question is, why am I testing this way anyway? That for most of our jobs, we get to look stuff up. That I don't have to memorize Piaget's stages. That why do I need that? And why do my students need to have those memorized? So instead, I'm much more focused on application. Students answer these 10 to 15 questions each week. We talk about it in class. They get to revise. They get to show, this is now my understanding that we've talked about it. And I do throw in some questions throughout the course that refer back to earlier in the course. So students are also getting that review and starting to see, I hope, how all of this content within psychology ties together.
Good. Yes. Day one of your class, what does day one look like for students?
Wow, day one. It's been a while since I had day one. It's been a few months now. Day one, I don't distribute a syllabus anymore. The syllabus is all in the course management system. I spend time talking about how the course is structured. I usually start with, there are no exams in this course, which makes students ridiculously excited. And then one person, always one person who is skeptical, says something like, okay, then what is there? So I talk about, and kind of, for those of you who've done open book exams, open note exams, take-home exams, that's really what these 10 to 15 questions end up being. But I don't frame them as exams. I call them assignments, right-to-learn assignments. So day one, we talk about the structure of the course. We talk about, we just do introductions. People have an opportunity to get to know one another. And the next class period, we talk quite a bit about time management strategies. So I actually get students into groups and, well, at one point, students get into groups and they talk about what questions they have about the course. So I'm putting the responsibility on them from the get-go, saying, look, you're going to be working in groups. You're going to be talking about what you know and what you don't know. So what are your questions? And I give each group a marker and I send them to the board. And what questions do you have about the course? Write them up on the board. Students do that. And then I have them get into, after we talk about all that, I have students get into groups again. And this time they talk about if they procrastinate and who doesn't, why, like what causes them to procrastinate. And we talk about that, and then we talk about strategies. What strategies do they use for overcoming procrastination? And we talk about that, and then I use whatever they generated in those two group discussions as a little introduction to psychology and what we're going to be covering in the course.
Yeah, it's I've heard now a bunch of people talk about their day one, and a lot of people put these hooks in. And so what is it that is going to, where I can connect my students' current experience or interest to psychology? And some people do it with classic studies, which are really interesting. And what you do it is, or how you do it is with a relevant experience, like procrastination, that probably drives them crazy because they've lost points or something because of it, right?
Right.
And then telling them that this is psychology. This is what we're going to talk about. And I hear this theme in your class of just this course should matter to students' lives.
That's right. And I make that really clear to students, too, at the beginning of the course, that this is not going to be a course that you're going to forget. You are going to remember this content. You're going to use this content.
Yeah. My next question's about technology. Do you know anything about that?
No, not a thing.
Okay, let's skip it.
Yeah, next question.
Yeah, so what do you use in your class? You use Canvas as a learning management system. Any other technology things you use?
The biggest thing that I use are Plickers, as in P-lickers. Yeah, they didn't think that one all the way through. So Plickers.com, totally free. It's a student response system. So what I really like about this is that the students don't need any technology. The students get a code, basically a QR code. It's kind of like a barcode. And they hold up this card, and each student has a card that is unique to them. Each one is numbered separately. You can attach students' names to them in the software. Totally free, web-based. And students rotate the card to vote. So one side of the card, it says A, another side it says B. And if they want to vote A, they rotate the card so A is at top. And they point the card toward me. I run the Plickers app on my phone. The app flips on my camera, and then I just scan the room, and it scans all these cards. And I get to see A, B, C, D, and how each student is voted. And then I can click the graph up on the computer screen, and students can see the distribution.
Totally
scores.
anonymous.
Totally anonymous.
And what are you asking them? Content questions or life questions, or what are you asking?
Mostly I am asking content questions. So for instance, when we talk about schedules of reinforcement, I have 10 examples of different schedules of reinforcement. And we do it for a little bit of extra credit. So it's like 3 points out of, 600 points in the course, but students absolutely love it. So I put up an example. Students can discuss in groups, in pairs, as an entire class. I don't care. And they talk about what it is. And I just stay out of the conversation. Once they decide, everybody flips up their cards, they vote. And if, 25 out of 28 students who are present that day get it right, then everybody earns a check mark for that. And they have to get like 8 out of 10 right to get the 3 extra credit points.
So they earn extra credit as a class?
As a class.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
I've not heard of that before. All right. What textbook do you use?
I use Myers and DeWall, Psychology in Everyday Life.
Pretty applied, right?
Pretty applied.
That's the idea.
That's right.
Because there is, what other ones are the modules and then the full text, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you want to talk about textbook at all?
Not really.
Okay. Let's keep going then. I have 2 questions for you. Are you happy with your course right now?
I am pretty happy with my course right now. I've got a couple chapters that I would like to really boost the content in, that I would really like to make more applied than what they currently are. But other than that, I like the questions that I have. I like how it structures the chapters. I like what students are walking away with when they finish those questions.
When you are revising a chapter, what's your process? Obviously, you probably have to set time aside for this chapter, and it's a really intentional thing, like this week I'm going to get into the content a little bit more.
You mean as I am structuring the course?
No, as you are, if you're choosing a chapter to sharpen up or...
No, I pretty much do them all at once. Okay. So I've created all this content. Well, how to phrase this? So I go to my Trello board and I say, okay, I am going to work on chapter 1 this week. Which questions do I want to dump? Which questions do I want to revise? Which questions do I want to add?
Right, and you must look through those questions and be like, I love that one. It's not going anywhere until in the foreseeable future. And then there are some that are, we could probably do better.
Exactly.
Yep. What are you looking at in your course right now? Is there anything that you're looking at your course and you have plans to change it?
The therapy chapter.
Okay, talk to us.
Well, right now, the questions that I have for it there are only 4 questions for that chapter. And they're big questions. One question, for instance, is imagine that you're a psychotherapist and you have a client come in and you are taking the psychodynamic approach. So the client says, so what approach do you take? Well, if you're psychodynamic, how do you answer that question? If you're cognitive, how do you answer that question? If you're behavioral, how do you answer that question? And it's a huge question. I like that students have to really get into the content and really think about what that content is and then transform it into their own words so that they can actually say it to somebody else. So I like that. I just don't know if that's really what students need to know. Because it seems like what students really need to know is, how do I find a psychotherapist? How do I choose a psychotherapist? What questions should I ask? What credentials should I look for? Something that is really practical in that nature.
And are you seeing that stuff in our current psych textbooks?
No.
Okay. So you are going to rethink the therapies chapter or throw it out?
I'm not ready to throw it out. I am totally not ready to throw it out. I think there's absolutely some good content in there, but the focus isn't where I think it should be. I think the content should be much more practical for our students.
And your focus is, this should be practical and apply to their lives. Mean something to them, as all of IntroPsych should.
Exactly.
Well, I think that's all the questions I have. I have a million questions, and I know that you talk about this stuff a lot with folks just casually. Where can people find you if they want to talk any more about this stuff? Can I open that door?
Yeah, you can open that door. The easiest place to find me is to go to SueFrantz.com. That's my technology blog, and you can certainly contact me through there.
Yeah, I suspect for many people, like for me, this really resonates on some level. I actually want psychology to be meaningful for students. And so, I appreciate your time, Sue. Thanks.
Thank you, Garth.